From the day he returned until his death, he never slept a single night. No doctor could offer an explanation. Some said sleep disorder, some said chronic anxiety, but the reports listed different diagnoses, and none of them held. None of them came anywhere close to the real cause. Cruz himself knew exactly why. What he had seen in the Cascade Mountains came back every time he closed his eyes. In 1987, a 6-man crew was sent to Northern Oregon. The job was supposed to be simple, but only one person made it out. That one person died 5 years after returning from complications brought on by never being able to sleep. This is the story of what happened to 6 people in the forests of Northern Oregon. This story was kept in the Restricted Cases section of the Oregon State Archives. The cover of the file read only, "Schaefer Inconclusive." The file began with the testimony of the sole survivor. His name appeared in the records as a worker called Daniel Cruz. In October of 1987, he had been sent with 5 co-workers to a logging camp in the Cascade Mountains. The mission was straightforward: retrieve the equipment from a camp that had been abandoned due to an early onset of autumn. A job planned to take 3 days, but the statement wasn't taken until 47 days later. The testimony, in Cruz's own words, began like this: "There were 6 of us, me, Marcus Webb, Jimmy Tolan, Pete Schroeder, Aaron Hale, and our crew chief Carl Brennan. Marcus was driving. The weather was clear when we set out. I remember it so well because the sun was coming in through the right window. Marcus turned on the radio. Nobody wanted to talk. That's how it is on jobs like this. Everyone knows their role. Nobody wastes words. The roads into the Cascade Mountains were single-lane dirt tracks listed in the records. But according to Cruz, the last 12 kilometers of the route looked nothing like what was shown on the map. The navigation kept repeating route recalculating. Carl never trusted the GPS much anyway. He pulled out the paper map. "Go straight, don't turn right," he said. We went the way he described. The camp appeared on the horizon around 3 in the afternoon. Cruz remembered it clearly. Carl glanced at his wristwatch and said, "We're half an hour behind schedule." The camp was larger than expected. It consisted of a main building, rows of wooden barracks, a storage depot, and a workshop. Everything was in its place. There were just no people. My first reaction was relief. "This place looks solid," I said. "We'll wrap this up fast," I thought. But they didn't wrap it up fast. The first night passed without incident. Cruz and the crew slept in the main building, the heating worked, and they had enough supplies. According to the records, Pete Schroeder had complained that he couldn't sleep. Pete stared out the window until morning. "There's something out there," he said. Carl laughed. "There's bears, there's deer, there's a whole lot of forest out there," he said. Pete nodded but didn't look convinced. The second day was spent loading and transporting equipment. Heavy machinery was loaded onto the vehicles. Smaller tools and other items were packed up. By Carl's estimate, everything would be ready the following day. When the second night came, Pete still couldn't sleep. This time he wasn't alone. Aaron heard it too. "Something is moving around the camp," he said. "Long strides, not heavy, but fast and irregular." Aaron had been a hunter his whole life. He would have recognized a bear. "This isn't a bear," he said. Carl said, "You haven't slept enough," then turned over and went to sleep. Cruz had spent hours watching the outside that night. The full moon lit up the camp perimeter in sharp detail. I saw something, or I thought I did. Something between the trees pulled back away from me fast. I couldn't say exactly what it was, but there was something out there. When morning came, Jimmy Tolan's bed was empty. When we woke up, it was made. That was a Jimmy thing. He always made his bed before getting up. That scared us more than anything. He had made his bed before he left. Carl rushed outside and called out for Jimmy, but there was no answer. Tracks led into the wooded area, matching the tread of Jimmy's boots. Carl showed for the first time that he was worried. He looked at his watch, then looked at the forest, then looked at us. "Get the radio," he said. The radio had no signal. Connection problems like that could happen in the mountains. They hadn't worried too much about it. But Jimmy's tracks, The radio silence and what Pete and Aaron had described all came together, and Carl made a decision. "We finish the loading today and we leave early tomorrow morning," he said. Nobody argued. The loading continued until midday. While Aaron and Pete worked in the depot, Cruz and Marcus were clearing out the main building, and Carl was outside assessing the convoy. At the midday break, all five were together. By evening, the number had dropped to 4. We didn't know where Pete was. We had last seen him behind the depot. Carl left us all and went there. He was gone a long time. When he came back, he said Pete saw something standing at the tree line behind the depot and followed it. He didn't say anything more. We didn't ask. Nobody slept that night. On the morning of the 4th day, Carl noticed something was wrong. Marks had been left around the vehicles. They didn't resemble any human or animal track. It was something none of them could identify. Abnormally large, appearing to belong to something with unusually long fingers, and pressing nearly a centimeter deep into what was soft soil. Marcus took photographs. Carl said, "Stop wasting time. Get ready. We're leaving." Both vehicles started at first, then stopped for no reason. Marcus turned the ignition over and over. The fuel tanks were full, the batteries were charged, every system looked normal, but the vehicles refused to start. Carl clearly didn't know what to say. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay, just okay." When they woke on the 5th day, Aaron's bed was empty. This time it hadn't been made. 3 people remained at the camp: Daniel Cruz, Marcus Webb, and Carl Brennan. Carl didn't open his mouth for hours that morning. He went out to the yard and looked around, then crawled under the vehicles and checked the engines. Then he came back inside, stood for a long time, and sat down. "Nothing outside is blocking the vehicles," he said. "There's something inside." Marcus asked, "What do you mean inside?" Carl never answered. That night, while Cruz was half asleep, he heard a sound. It was coming from the attic. It didn't sound like any kind of movement he recognized. It was as if something very heavy was being dragged slowly across a wooden floor. I looked at Marcus. He had heard it. I looked at Carl. He had too. Carl stood up and looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at us and said, "Nobody goes anywhere alone." Then the ceiling went silent. But when they opened the door in the morning, footprints were there, as if someone had come inside during the night and gone back out. Yet the building had only one entrance, and the 3 of them had been inside all night. On the 6th day, Marcus disappeared. Before noon, he had gone to the front of the depot to check the spare fuel canisters. He was maybe 10 steps away. Carl and I were standing at the door of the main building. When we looked over, not a single sound had been made. The silence was total. And when we saw he wasn't there, we turned back. All that was left behind was Marcus's glove, dropped in the mud on the ground. I looked at Carl. Carl looked at me. "2 of us," he said. Cruz and Carl spent that night in the smallest, most interior room of the building. They barricaded the door from inside with heavy furniture. Carl drew the handgun he always carried on him, the way every mountain worker carried a weapon. Cruz took an iron bar from the toolbox. We didn't talk, because there was nothing left to say. We just sat and waited. After midnight, the sounds started again, but this time they weren't coming from the ceiling. It was as if something was moving between the walls, something shifting inside the wood. Very slow and silent. Carl said to me, "Close your eyes." I closed them. "Open them," he said. I opened them. In the moonlight coming through the gap under the door, I saw someone's feet. Standing right in front of the door, Carl raised the gun. Whatever was there didn't move at first, but then it withdrew. The rest of the night until morning passed in complete silence. When the sun came up, Carl pushed the furniture aside, walked to the door, and eased it open. Outside looked calm and ordinary. The building was the same. Nothing had changed. Carl stepped outside. I stood in the doorway. Then Carl turned around and said, "The vehicles are running." Cruz never found out why the vehicles hadn't worked until that morning, or why they suddenly started. No engineer could offer an explanation. No fault was found in the fuel line, the batteries, or the ignition system. It was as if the vehicles had decided on their own to start that morning. There was no other explanation. Carl and Cruz jumped in the vehicles and left. They left the loaded equipment behind in the camp. They left their 4 co-workers behind. We didn't speak until we were off the road. Carl said something and I didn't want to hear it because I already knew what he was going to say. "We're not going back there," he said. "No," I said. "We can't find them," he said. I didn't answer. Cruz's written statement ended at that point. The final section of the document contained the authorities' notes. Daniel Cruz is the sole survivor of the Schaefer logging camp incident. Carl Brennan abandoned his vehicle 3 days before making it out of the Cascade Mountains and walked into the forest. He did not say why. Brennan's body was never found. Cruz died 5 years after giving his statement. The official record documented the cause of death as complications from sleep disorder. He had not slept once in 5 years. Schaefer logging camp was declared off limits by the Oregon Department of Forestry in 1988. The stated reason was structural unsafety. The area remains closed today. The file was briefly made accessible in 2019 due to a technical error. It was closed again within a few hours. Cruz's written statement ended there. But something didn't end. In the corner of the file's last page, there was a note written in pencil. It had not been entered into the official record, as if the person who wrote it had to write it somewhere, but didn't know where. The note read, Cruz gave his statement in a flat voice. His voice never trembled. At the end, he only said, "The forest didn't let them go. The forest didn't let any of them go." I didn't ask any further questions or what he was feeling. I didn't want to ask because I didn't have the courage. Schaefer logging camp is still standing right where it always was. State authorities have been blocking access to that area since 1988. The official reason on record was building unsafety. For nearly 40 years, a wooden camp building has been left sitting in place for decades. No one is allowed in, and no effort is being made to tear it down. The file is open, the area is closed, and nobody is moving. The only thing being done is keeping the entrance blocked. Sometimes the real fear lies in a question going unanswered. Sometimes the most unsettling thing is not understanding why certain doors are kept closed. The Cascade Mountains know, and they are still waiting. When I first read this document, I had one question. Who had closed this and why? Now, the only thing I find myself wondering is, did the person who closed this file read what was inside? I will never find the answer to that question. But this story is no longer just in an archive file. Now this story lives in you too. If you want to follow files like this, closed cases, buried records, subscribe. But let me say one thing first. Don't watch these in the dark. You don't want to be alone with these questions at night.